just say, oh, hey, what did you mean when you said this? Or hey, can you give an example of this? So please don't be shy. I love feeling like I'm talking to people, not at people, with people.
Yeah.
It's always a bit funny when you're virtual and you feel like you're just talking to your computer. But yeah, so why don't I get started? I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if I can just share my entire thing. Okay, so I assume you can see Chrome right now. You can see my web browser, so my slides.
Oh.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I don't know if I feel like this is just sharing Chrome. So let me just see. Let me just do a little test. If I open RStudio, which it's thinking, can you see that, or you can still just see my slides?
No, just the slides.
Okay, cool. I'll just switch it when the time comes. Great. Okay, so I'm just gonna get started. So I actually gave a talk at RStudio conference in January, which was conveniently in San Francisco, which is where I'm living, where I just gave a 5-minute talk on, motivation for blogging. There's not a lot of point in showing you how to make a blog if you're like, well, I'm not going to make a blog anyway. So my first goal is to convince you that making a blog is actually a really useful thing, and to tell you a little bit about my story and how I ended up making a blog in the first place. So here, these slides, I have links for here. So the first link here is just how you can find these slides. Everything that I'm going to do, like I'm going to switch away from the slides when I'm doing the kind of live coding thing, but everything that I do in that live session is also in these slides. So just like when I'm kind of doing things live, especially when there's a short period of time, I generally encourage people to just listen rather than to try and code along. With a longer period of time, I think it's easier to code along because then if you run into bugs, we have time to kind of fix things. But it's up to you. You can do whatever you like. But yeah, so on this front page, there's also several ways that you can get in touch with me. Twitter, my email, my website. I'm also on GitHub. So there's a lot of kind of different ways. It's very easy to get in touch with me if you ever need to. Okay, so I have a website, as Ines kindly mentioned. So my blog is literally, the domain is my name. So I bought a domain that was like rebeccabarter.com. But I post a lot of things about R primarily. Sometimes it used to be a little bit more about stats. Now it's a bit more about R. It's kind of shifted over the years. And like I found it to be a really, really useful thing for my career and just kind of getting, like, people know me in the R community because specifically of my blog. This is what my blog looks like. I like pretty simple themes. I'll show you how to create a blog and change themes in a little bit. So why, like, okay, there are a few main reasons why I think starting a blog is a really, really good idea. And the main one is to learn. So like you never really understand something until you have to explain it to someone else. So at least I find, so like I'll talk about this as well, but one of the main reasons that I post blogs in the first place is because there's something that I want to learn. So like with the purr package, I made a blog post about the purr package because I wanted to be able to use it. And I kind of played around a little bit with map functions from the purr package, but I hadn't really kind of done a deep dive, and writing a blog post was a really good excuse to just kind of explore everything about the purr package. And after I'd written it, I felt like, yeah, okay, now I'm an expert. Whereas, I think when you write a blog, people think that you're supposed to already be an expert in the thing. And I think that's not the case. I think like when you're writing to explain something, it's actually better if you're learning it, because then you can look at it from the eyes of someone who doesn't already know it because you don't already know it. So like I think like this is really one of the biggest things, even though this wasn't my initial motivation. My initial motivation was actually to kind of create an online portfolio for myself, essentially like an online like look, I can do things. Because I figured one day I was going to want to, apply for a job. And the thing that I really like doing is teaching. And so it really helps to have evidence that I can explain things online. So this was actually my initial motivation. Even though I think the thing that I've gotten most out of it is, yes, it is the exposure. So like people know who I am, but for me personally, I've learned a lot from doing it. Another really big thing is that it's a really good way to practice your communication skills. So as data scientists, it's not just that we have to do data analysis, we also have to explain what we've done to other people. No matter whether you're in academia or in industry or working for a company or like whatever you're doing, a big part of your job is always going to be communicating to other people. So like having to write a blog and having to explain things to other people is a really good way to just practice that without a lot of pressure. It's like, starting out, probably not a lot of people are going to be reading your blog. I think it was probably only after I'd been writing my blog for 3 years that I started actually getting people looking at it. And I was surprised that wasn't actually, I wasn't really expecting that. I wasn't really doing it for other people initially. I was mostly just doing it for myself. And then the fourth reason is for procrastination. So I don't know about you, but I often have those days where I just can't make myself do the things I'm supposed to do. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, and I want to feel like I'm doing something productive. And so often I find on those days, it's just that I'm sick of doing the specific thing that I'm doing. And so if I shift gears and I do something different, such as write a blog post, I can feel like I've had a productive day, even though I haven't done the things I was supposed to do. I've still done things that were useful for me, for both my growth and for like putting myself out there on the internet. So I think a lot of the issues that people have, it's not really issues, it's just like a lot of the fear of starting a blog is like, well, what would I write about? There are like, I kind of touched on this already, but there are kind of two main things that I do to choose a topic for my blog. And that's, I write about something that I just learned, especially if I found that the resources out there were really bad. If I had a hard time learning it, I assume other people also would have had a hard time learning it. And I make an effort to write a blog because it's like, okay, now my thoughts about this topic are finally clear. That for me is just kind of like, I want to give that little kind of package of thoughts that I've developed, and it was really frustrating to develop, and I want to give that nice package to other people. So that's often a way that I choose something to write about. And the other is I write about something that I want to learn. So I mentioned this one already, which is that often I write about something. When I write a blog post, I didn't know about that thing before. Like I knew it existed and I knew it was a thing I wanted to learn. An example is the PER package and tidy models. These were things that like I'd been seeing a lot on Twitter, and I'm like, I need to know what these things are better. By the way, Twitter is a really, really good way of keeping up with what's happening in the R community. If you're not on Twitter, I highly recommend making an account, even just to like follow a bunch of people. Like I don't actually post on Twitter very often. It's just a really, really useful way. You just start seeing all the people like talking to each other about different things in R, and you're just like, oh wow, that's a thing. People keep talking about PER. And it's just like, for me, that's how I definitely learn. Thank you for the thumbs up. And that's definitely how I learn about a lot of things that I think I need to know. And then my way of learning them is to write a blog post about them. And you can even do this without making it public. You don't have to show people. It could just be like, you want to write yourself a summary of something that you want to learn. It's just rather than forcing yourself to just use it in your project, because you're going to be like, oh, this is taking too long, I'm just going to use the thing that I know. It's like a really nice kind of excuse to use something new, because it's like, this document I'm writing is just about this new thing. I'm going to get as far as I can and look up all the resources. And I do that all the time. So if you are planning on writing a blog that you want hopefully other people to eventually start reading, especially if it has tutorials, a blog doesn't have to have tutorials. That's just my main kind of approach to blogging. You very much want to use interesting data sets, there's a caveat because often the interesting data sets require a lot of energy to read in to R, whereas the kind of common boring data sets like the iris data set, it's not interesting, but it's easily accessible because you just type iris in R. So I usually have a middle ground, which is I want something that doesn't need a lot of cleaning because I don't want to bog people down with dealing with cleaning. But I want something that I can literally load directly from the internet with a URL directly in R. So it'll be like read CSV and then the URL, and then I have it in R. Finding data is a whole nother thing. Finding data is incredibly frustrating. I wish I had a good way of finding data. Usually I just like have an idea of the topic and I just Google frantically and look up a bunch of like databases and stuff. And I'm like, is there anything that's easy to use and actually does what I want? Often the answer is no. But that's, yeah. Finding data is the bane of my existence sometimes. I'm writing a book at the moment, as Ines mentioned, and a lot of, I need a lot of data examples, and it's really frustrating trying to find data examples that are good. Another thing that I highly recommend, so like when I first started blogging, I used to say a lot of the time, oh, I'm sorry, I'm probably giving way too many details. Like, sorry, I'm making this like seem like, I'm like over explaining everything. And the number one comment I got from people was like, you're not giving too many details, this is just right. So I think I think one way I think about when I'm writing is like, I'm explaining it to my grandmother. So it's just like, I try and like, even if something's obvious to me, that doesn't mean that it's obvious to everyone. And if someone's reading my blog, it's probably not obvious to them. So even when I think things are obvious, I over explain everything. And I think most people don't view it as over explaining because for them, it's the details that they need. So like keep things really simple, try to avoid like heavy use of jargon and saying, oh, well, obviously things are like this, or this is just simply you use the map function, like things aren't as simple as you think they are a lot of the time. Like things aren't always obvious to everyone. So it's, you don't want to talk down to your audience. It's a thing. I read a blog once, a post from someone who was just like, if you need this explained to you, you're clearly not, you're an idiot. And I was just like, that's so mean. I need that explained to me. I don't think I'm an idiot. So I think it's like, be kind and thoughtful to your audience. Like there's a big difference between, an expert who thinks something's obvious and a novice who really doesn't think something's obvious, but is afraid, they think it's supposed to be obvious if you say that, and then they get discouraged. So yeah, I literally used stick figures to explain something once, so that was fun. Yeah, so if you do want to, like, I think like you definitely don't need to like have a very public facing blog to get the benefits out of it. But if you do want to kind of get the public aspect of it, for example, like, like if you want people to start reading your blog and you want to use it as a way to kind of get known in the R community, Twitter is 100% the best way to do that. So I mentioned like I don't actually post on Twitter very often, but when I do, it's usually, hey, I have a new blog post, and then I get like a lot of people like commenting and liking and retweeting, and it's really nice because like it's very little work. It literally took me 2 seconds to post that on Twitter, and now all of a sudden I have 2,000 people going to my website. So it's just like, it's really nice to, it's like 100%, at least at the moment, the best way to kind of get the news out that you've posted something. And again, like following people on Twitter is a really good way of keeping up with our community, especially when we're all remote and you can't go to just talk to people in person. Something else that I highly recommend is to use easily Googleable titles. So like Twitter is a really good way of getting the word out in the first place. But most of my traffic to my website is actually through Google. So all of my titles, they're just like a tutorial of carrot, or like, something, I don't know, like just like I have like pretty simple titles because you want them to come up in Google when someone types something like carrot tutorial. Like my website, at least it was when I searched this, was the second entrance on Google. So it's like, I think there's a combination of people linking to it, but also like having the thing that people are going to be searching be in the title of my post. Another thing that I highly recommend doing, because it's really fun, is to run tutorials, do this kind of thing, you know, like RLadies, at least, you know, in San Francisco, are always looking for speakers. You know, and I imagine as things are getting more remote, there's going to be even more opportunities for this kind of thing. So like teaching people something live is just like writing about it, is a really good way to learn something. And it's also a really good way to get exposure and to, you know, have a lot of people take photos of you with your eyes closed. So that's fun. Okay, so I'm gonna like move on to the second part, but I want to pause and see if any of you have any questions for me so far. It's fine if you don't, no pressure, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you do have any.
Yep, I have one.
Yeah, please do.
Do you ever feel the pressure to write constantly? I mean, does it happen for you to run out of subjects and you feel like, oh, I have to write? You feel uncomfortable with the fact that,
Totally.
I don't know, people are expecting you to write?
Totally. So I've kind of two things to say on that point. Like that's totally a thing. I actually have a running list of topics that I want to write about, which isn't very long. There's usually like 5 things on it, and I usually like don't ever write about half of them. But there is a little bit of pressure sometimes. But the thing that I've noticed most of all is that if I don't post for 6 months, no one's going to notice. I also make a point of, if I start writing a post, I make a point of finishing it within a few days, because if I don't, I'm never going to finish it. I have a few posts that I started and then went away and did something else, and I never came back to them.
Yeah, discipline.
Yeah, so it's kind of like yes, there is, but for the most part, I'm like writing them for myself, you know, and I've never had someone be like, hey, why haven't you written a post lately? And I only write probably maybe 3 or 4 posts a year. I don't write that much. But if you do 3 or 4 posts a year for 5 years, you have like 30 posts out there, you know. And it looks like you've been really like productive and active. But like, you know, if I go to my website, it's now, my screen sharing doesn't like that. It is now June. I wonder how many I've done this year. Maybe I do a little more than 3 or 4 a year. But I've done, this was in, where does it say the date? Here. So this is April, February. Yeah, so I've written 3 posts this year and it's June. So, you know, it's not like, it's certainly not the kind of thing where you have to do it all the time. I very much is like, I have a lull in what I'm doing, or I really can't focus on what I'm doing. I'm going to take this opportunity to like tackle the thing on my list of things that I've wanted to write about. Yeah, so like there is a little bit of like, I feel like I need to come up with a new topic or something, but not that much, you know. Good question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you for the response.
Of course. Does anyone else have any questions before we move on? Cool. Okay, so the second part of this, what time is it? 9:48. Okay, so this, fortunately, making a blog is really like a lot less work than it seems like it is. I'm curious, actually, does anyone have a blog already?
No. So I tried a bit Blogdown for our RLadies Bucharest page. So I tried a bit. I tried to write a blog, but I wrote it mostly for generating some data into Google Analytics for a presentation I kept last year outside of work. But I'm not actually a blogger, but I'm planning to. This is why we have you here. So.
Well, that's awesome. Oh yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of funny because it's like, you know, I never thought like, you know, I go to like R conferences now and people come up to me and they're like, oh, your blog is so helpful. And like, I never kind of set out with that goal, you know.
But
like,
it is, you know, it's really helpful, your blog.
Oh, I'm so glad. It's kind of funny because like, you know, I have like Google Analytics set up. So I see how many people go to my website, but like, you know, every now and then someone emails me, which is really nice. But for the most part, I'm like putting it out there and like, I don't know if people find it useful. I mean, they must because they go to it, but like,
we can check some details in Google Analytics. I might help you there.
Yeah, but it's been really nice. I mean, I think that's something that's motivated me to keep it going for so long, is that I do have people reach out to me actively and say thank you for writing these things. Whereas I think if I felt like they weren't actually helpful for anyone, and they weren't helpful for me, I mean, I think they have become especially helpful for me in the last few years because I've been using it to learn things rather than just explaining things that I think will be useful for people. But I think if it didn't kind of start out being useful to people, I'm not sure I would have kept going, because I didn't start out with the whole like learning things mentality. But I think that is 100% like a really good way to think about it. Yeah.
Sorry to, so yeah, I was thinking now how I found your blog. So I don't remember exactly, but I read you have a post on workflow of your of the project. So this was like, wow, I was totally charmed because I come from a SaaS world. And we are used with organizing somehow the project, but in R, I've never seen this approach. So you were the first one. Maybe there are others, but on your blog, I saw that. So it was like, aha, so finally more interesting stuff to structure my ideas. So
yeah, and that's awesome to hear. Yeah, it's kind of funny because that post was like, it took me, like when I started out in R, probably 10 years ago. And everything I did was just so messy. Like I had R scripts everywhere. I had like, everything was just like a nightmare. And it took me probably 6 or 7 years, like probably in the last 4 years, I've kind of got it down, but like it took a really long time of just trial and error to figure out what works in terms of a workflow. And I didn't see any resources online. So that was an example of like, this is something that I figured out through years and years of like struggling. And so I made an effort to like write a post about it. So like that's a really good example of like, you know, my initial kind of approach, which was like, there's something that I learned that was really hard to learn. And here is how it can be useful to other people. I see how it could be useful to other people, not necessarily expecting that it will be, but like it might be. So for sure. Awesome. Yeah. So let's like make a blog. I am pretty into showing people how to do things live because I think even if you're not following along, I feel like often if I'm trying to follow along and I get stuck on something, I stop listening. So I tend to encourage people to just watch, and then I make sure all the resources are available. Here's a link to these slides and the Blogdown book. So Blogdown is what I use to make my blog. Is written by Yihui, there's like Hadley Wickham, Yihui, and like a few other people were all PhD students together at Iowa State. And they like have just made R amazing. Like I don't think RLadies would exist without them, for example, because they turned R from this thing that is just a weird, quirky coding language to something that is actually really powerful and really consistent and really useful. And they write really excellent resources. So Yihui wrote this book, and a few other people at our studio as well. They wrote this book that's literally called Blogdown. You can find it, this link here. But yeah, so everything that I'm about to do, I have in these slides, like step by step. So I've got like literally like line by line what I do. So I just want to make sure you know that what I'm about to show you does exist at the link here in these slides. And so this is recorded as well, so you can come back and listen to it. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to start sharing our studio. Let me see. Here we go. Okay, can you see my RStudio console?
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Sweet. Okay, so we're literally just gonna make a really basic blog. So like I mentioned, I use Blogdown. So you might need to install Blogdown if you have not done so already. So I'm gonna type this command in the console because when I'm installing packages, I usually don't want that to be in my R script because I only ever want to run it once. So we've got install packages, Blogdown. So I already have Blogdown installed, so it's gonna get upset at me. And I wrote it wrong. Install, not install. It's gonna ask me if I want to update it. I'm gonna click no. Well, I don't know what it's doing now. It's probably just installing it. So I am installing Blogdown, which you need to do just once, just like all our packages. And I also want to install Hugo. So Hugo, Blogdown is kind of built on top of Hugo, which is a kind of piece of software that lets you develop static web pages. I don't know what that means. I feel like I learned 5 years ago when I made my blog, and then since then it has not come up, and so I've forgotten. So like it turns out it doesn't actually matter if you know what a static web page is or not. You can have a very successful blog without knowing these things. Exhibit A is that I do not know these things, but you do need to install Hugo. Fortunately, that is very easy to do in R. Blogdown. So in case you're not familiar with this syntax, and the name of a package followed by 2 colons is a way of just accessing a function from that package without loading that package. I don't know why I always kind of use Blogdown functions with this rather than saying library Blogdown and then using all of the functions. I should just write library, it's fine. I'm just gonna do this. Install Hugo. So fortunately, there is a function from Blogdown that lets you install Hugo. So I don't know if this is gonna work for me because I've already done it. Oh yeah, so for me, it says Hugo has already been installed. I could force it to do it by using the argument force equals true inside these parentheses. But I'm not going to do that. But you might, I don't know, it probably will just work for you. If it doesn't, we'll figure it out later. Great. Okay, so theoretically, having used these 2 commands, so install packages Blogdown and Blogdown install Hugo, you're ready to go. So what we're going to do is we're going to use projects in RStudio. So I feel like I should use projects more. I don't use projects as much as I should. They're great. But I kind of already had like a workflow in place before projects came along, and it doesn't really change much for me. But we're just for the sake of kind of starting a whole new folder without having to do anything in like Finder, in like the normal kind of, Finder. I'm on a Mac, so I don't know what system you guys are using. But we're going to start a new project, and we're going to make that project our blog. So I'm going to go File, New Project. And I'm going to hit New Directory, New Project, and I'm just going to call it Blog Example. So I'm going to create a project. So it's going to make this all go away, and then it's going to come back as a new project. So what a project does is it essentially sets up a working directory where it changes my working directory of my console to the location of that project, which is really nice. And if I hit Files down here, this is already what's in my project that I've just created. So you can see that, if you look at my file path, it's inside Google Drive, inside work, talks, 2020 blogging, RLadies Bucharest, and then blog example, which is what I just called this project. I suspect that if I try and open Finder right now, you won't be able to see my Finder window, which is kind of annoying. But I didn't do any navigating to this location. It did it for me. That's what's nice about projects. You don't have to deal with setting your working directory. It kind of just does it for you. And have I already edited this one? No. Okay, so this basically sets up a bunch of folders for you. Everything that you edit lives in content. No, this is confusing. I'm sorry. It's already started a blog for me. I think I already had a thing called blog example in that folder. So I'm going to start that again. Let me just go through my computer, and I'm just going to delete what I had. So I've deleted that. I'm just going to do this again. So I'm going to go File, New Project, New Directory, New Project, and I'm going to call it Blog Example. All right, let's just call it something else. Let's just call it Blog RLadies. And now it's going to do this all again, and it's not going to already have all of this stuff. Sorry, that was very confusing. Okay, so now, yes, okay, perfect. So in my files panel, which is this bottom right, there are no files there. That's what we want. That's what you expect when you start a new project. And you can see my working directory can you see my mouse, like my cursor when I'm moving it?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so up here, you can see that it's in this blog RLadies file that I've just created when I started my new project. So I want to turn this empty folder, this empty project into a blog. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a Blogdown function called new site. So what this is going to do, blah, 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 blah. Blogdown, great. I can't type very well. What this is going to do is it's going to take this, so watch this files panel down the bottom. So it's going to take this and it's going to turn this folder into a blog. So it's adding a bunch of files. If I looked in Finder, which my screen sharing I think won't let you see, I would see these files being created in this folder. So it's creating a bunch of stuff. And it's switched over to the viewer panel. So now I have this, essentially the viewer panel is showing me my website that I haven't done anything to create other than write new site. So this is kind of the default. I'm going to click this little button here with an arrow. Actually, it's not going to show you because I'm only sharing RStudio. But if you did do that, it would open up in Chrome or Safari or whatever your default web browser is. But this is actually a website. This is a blog. I could hit about and it will take me to about. And it's got the default kind of thing. I can go back to the home page. I can click on Hello ARM Markdown as a post. And it's got some posts there. So this must have been where I started with my blog because I remember seeing this pyramid. I thought it was really funny, so I actually kept it as my first ever blog post.
Template, right? So when you get the function, it's just a template that they give you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is like just with that single command that was Blogdown new site, we've created a blog.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can edit things. So notice how it opened this file, which I think is this Hello R Markdown post. Because if I click on Hello R Markdown again, it says, this is an R Markdown document, which is the same as over here. This is an R Markdown document. I could change this and I could just delete everything and say, hello, Bucharest. And I could save it. I'm just going to save it. I'm not going to do anything. Notice how things are happening over here. Something moved, something flashed. And it's actually remaking the entire site. And I didn't have to do anything. I didn't do anything at all. All it's doing is remaking the entire site. Oops. And I can hit refresh. And now it's updated my site, which is really cool. Like, you don't have to actually do anything to recompile your site. If you've already run, in this case, we've run new site. Normally you would run serve site, which I realized is not in the slides, but I'll add it. So the first time you do it, you run new site, and then after that, it just automatically generates. And if you want it to stop generating, write Blogdown stop server. So then if I edit something, I'm going to run that command. Now, if I edit something, we are learning to blog. Now, if I update that and I save it, it's not going to rerun and it's not going to recompile. So sometimes I find it annoying that it automatically recompiles every time I save, because sometimes I have something that's taking a long time to load, and I can't use my console while it's recompiling. So this is kind of like the first blog, but there are like, I don't think this theme is particularly nice. Oh, now it's gone because I stopped the server. So I tried to go back to the home page and I got this sad file because I stopped the server. So it's no longer kind of listening to my kind of blog files to create the thing. It's cut that thing, which lived the actual like HTML web page itself, which was living locally like that. Well, you don't need the internet for that to happen. So what we're going to do is, let's say I wanted a different theme. I'm gonna make a new blog with a different theme. There are a few ways to kind of start a new theme, but there's a very common theme, which is the academic theme. So I'm going to start a whole new project. I'm going to start this again, new directory, new project. And I'm going to call it blog 2. And it's loading a new project, which is in the same place, but now I don't have all of my old blogging stuff because I've started a new folder. So now instead, I'm going to write the same thing I wrote last time, which is I want to turn this folder into a blog, but I want to add an argument. So I want to choose a theme. Specifically, I'm going to choose the academic theme. So there are a lot of themes that you can find that I'll show you in a moment. I would just have to switch to sharing Chrome again instead of RStudio. So I'll show you. I don't want to do that right now, but I'm just going to select a theme that I want, and I'm going to run this command, this new site command. And again, it's going to create all these files down here. And it's loading that academic theme from the interwebs. And it's adding all the files it needs. So this is essentially just loading in a different default. And then once it's done, it'll flip us over to viewer. Always takes a minute the first time because you have to load stuff and compile stuff. Building sites. Great. There we go. Okay, so this theme is actually really nice. So this theme has like a lot of kind of cool HTML stuff going on, some cool JavaScript going on. You've got you can have a photo, a biography, your education, your skills, your experience, your accomplishments, some posts. I could click on that post and see what happened. Oh, it takes me to a post. That's awesome. You know, it's because all of your posts are essentially R Markdown files. You can have code and you can have it compile as if you were writing R Markdown. It has a nice little menu so I can go to everything. Oh, what courses have I taught? I've taught an example course. That's great. Yeah, so there's like a lot of different things you can do. So I can, for example, there's this config.toml file, which it often has all the metadata for the website. So I'm going to change a few things in there. So if I just click on that, it opens up in my left panel. So instead of having the title be academic, I want the title to be my name. you know, there's some other things that you can change if you want to. I don't know what any of them mean, but sometimes I just play around with things randomly. But all I've changed is title is now my name, and I'm going to save it. And because I've changed something, it's going to rebuild the site much quicker than the first time, fortunately. And now when I go to viewer, instead of saying academic at the top, it says my name. So I can also go back to files. So all of my posts and my about and my CV, everything lives in this content folder. So I can go and I can look at, okay, what's in authors? I don't know why there's two folders, but that's okay. Let's go in the English one, and I'm going to open up index. So the authors, that's got stuff about me. Okay. So what's my bio? My bio is that I like data. Matter? No, I like data. My education is PhD in stats at Berkeley, and I actually got that in 2019. I'm going to remove all this other stuff. Let's pretend I like artificial intelligence and that my organization is Berkeley. So let's save that, and it's going to again recompile everything. I'm going to flip back over to viewer. And I want to go to, let's see, this is the about, I guess, or authors. Where does that live? Sometimes it's funny kind of like learning about where things are. Not that one. Oh yeah, here it's kind of changed some stuff for me. So now it's changed what my education is. It's changed what my interests are. I need to find where it says, oh, down here, it's got in the same file, it's got stuff about Nelson Baghetti, whoever that may be. Rebecca is a data scientist. Now, if I save that, it's going to update this. So you can kind of see how like these files all connect to the different aspects. Like the different themes just have different ways of combining the files together. Now it says my biography, Rebecca is a data scientist, and it just updated that automatically. And I can change this. So it's my name is not Nelson, but my name is Rebecca. And you can like, basically like my suggestion if you want to start a blog is just like play around with a lot of different themes till you find one that you want, because it's really easy to change theme early on. It's really hard to change theme much later because you're going to end up kind of customizing a lot of things. Wow, I'm a professor of artificial intelligence at Berkeley. That's not true. But yeah, so like you can kind of see like if I go back to this files content. So this was the kind of master project folder, and I click on content. Everything that I want to change that's in my website, it lives in one of these folders, and every theme you have has a slightly different structure. But you can see kind of how everything fits together. So, okay, I want to kind of go back to Chrome for a moment, but before I do that, does anyone have any questions about this kind of stuff in R that I can show you?
So I have a question. I was curious, although I think maybe it's too fast. So when you are creating a new post, you actually create a new markdown file, which afterwards stay in the content. This is how it works.
Yeah.
Just to.
Yeah. So I'm creating. So the way I did this to kind of start off is like I created a new project that was empty, and I ran that new site function from Blogdown package, which created all of this structure. And the second time I added a theme argument that downloaded a theme from the internet. And I'm going to show you lots of examples of themes in just one moment. Okay. And it created all of this structure. So it created all of these things. And so basically the way it works is config is like kind of metadata. You'll need to change that once, and then you'll never touch that again unless you're changing things about yourself. Content is where everything lives, and content is like where all your R markdown files live. Sometimes they're just markdown files, which is the same. It's just you can't use R in it, but you can treat them exactly the same. So that's MD instead of RMD at the end. And then what the Blogdown package is doing is it's taking everything from content and it's creating HTML versions and it's putting them into public. And public is actually where the website, the HTML version of the website lives. A lot of this other stuff, like, you know, I don't really know a lot about Hugo itself. Like, I've had a pretty big blog for a long time and I don't know a lot about the underneath things that are going on. But I know, like, sometimes you run into issues and it's better. Like, I remember when I was starting out, I think I had to just totally remake my site like 10 times because I broke something and I didn't understand what I'd broken. So like, that's probably gonna happen, but that's okay. Eventually you kind of just like find a theme that just works for you and you don't quite know why, and you stick with it. But yeah, let me show you some examples of themes. Let me share Chrome. Usually I feel like I have an option to just share my entire thing, but I seem not to have that option right now. Oh yeah, now you get to see my emails. Great, how exciting. All right, can you all see Chrome? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to go to themes.gohugo. Actually, first, let me show you what our website actually looks like in Chrome. It's much better than in RStudio. So this is the website that I just made in front of you. It's kind of jolty right now, but it's not usually. Yeah, it's like actually really nice and scrolly, and yeah, it's like the academic theme is actually a really nice theme, which is why I chose it. It's not necessarily like, oops, I just stopped sharing accidentally. It's not necessarily like a great blogging theme, but it's like, if you just want to have a really simple website, it's a really, really good platform for that. Okay, so this website, themes.gohugo.io, has a bunch of really nice themes. I'm just going to choose one at random. Here's Newsroom, and you can hit download, and that's going to take you to a GitHub. So you know when I did, I added a themes argument, and that themes argument that I used was gcushion/Hugo Academic. That was the username and then the name of the theme. So you can install it directly from GitHub using that theme argument of new site, which is really cool. Yeah, you can also hit on demo. So that's what I recommend you doing. If you want to check out a theme before installing it yourself. This theme is fine. It has it's mostly post focused, I guess. It has an about page where you can write things about yourself. So like there's like hundreds of themes in this themes.gohugo.io site, most of which you can install directly using that themes argument of new site. And so just play around with all the themes that you see here. And if there's something that strikes you, try it. It might work, it might not work. Some things play nicer with R Markdown than others because these aren't actually designed for Blogdown, they're designed for Hugo. So just play around with different things. What else did I want to say? Oh yeah, so how do you get your website online? So currently this website that we've made, this URL is just like numbers. It's just hosted locally on my computer, and I'm looking at the local website. This is not on the internet, but it opens in a web browser. So this is like my local version. How do I get that to, RebeccaBarter.com, which is where my current website lives? So let me go back to my slides. Everything is slow. Okay, here we go. All right, let's just start from here and flick through. Loading. Okay, here we go. Okay, so there's two things that you're going to want to use if you want to get your website online. One is GitHub. So I don't know if you guys have used GitHub much. If you have, this will be fairly straightforward. If you have not, GitHub has a bit of a learning curve, which is unfortunate. It's like not very intuitive at all. And it's really easy to mess everything up. But it's actually really powerful. And it's basically every data science thing every software engineering thing, every package is just hosted on GitHub. And once you've used it for a while, even if all you're doing is never like collaborating with anyone, but it's just pushing, is like adding, committing, and pushing to a repository, you kind of get that flow down. And you don't need to be super advanced. Like literally to host a website on GitHub is you make a repository for your website and you just push everything from that folder to that GitHub repository. So if you've used GitHub before, you can totally do that. If not, I highly recommend learning how to use GitHub just by forcing yourself to do it. For every project you do, it can be private. You don't have to have it be public, but like just kind of, because you're probably gonna at some point in your life need to use GitHub. So like I'd recommend starting learning when you don't really need to, because otherwise it's gonna be really stressful down the line. The other thing is this website called Netlify. So I used to, when I first started my website, I hosted it on GitHub. Like I had a GitHub repository for it. And then I used something called GitHub Pages to create a website from it. And it was so complicated. I don't even remember how it was complicated, but I remember it being complicated. I think there were just like 7 different layers of things I had to do to get it to kind of compile to the website. I had to make new branches and push to multiple different branches, and it was just way too complicated. And then Netlify came along and just made everything really easy. So GitHub is like, here, my GitHub is Barter, and I have a repository called Personal Website, which is just where I push all of my website stuff to. I just push everything. I don't even like, I'm not specific about what I push. Technically, it's only caring about the public folder because that's where the HTML stuff lives. And I never do anything manually to the public folder. But basically you set up a Netlify account and you tell it the name of the repository, you give it permission because it might be private or not, I don't know. And you tell it what folder it needs to look in. In this case, it's the public folder because that's where all the HTML stuff is. And then you have a website. You literally just set it up and you tell it what the repository is, and it will create a like netlify.io/name of your website, like whatever you want to call it. I also bought a domain name from Google, which is I bought RebeccaBarter.com from Google, and you can just point whatever domain name you want to your website. So it doesn't have to use the Netlify URL. So it can use whatever you want, which is really cool. If you've used GitHub before, it's pretty easy to do. If you haven't, I think you're probably going to run into some frustrations, but that's unfortunately life. That's GitHub not being very intuitive for new users. But Netlify makes it really, really easy once your GitHub repository is set up to be able to just, anytime I push to my GitHub repository, Netlify automatically updates my website. And it tries to compile it. And if it's broken, it doesn't push to my website. So like if I upload something to my GitHub repository that breaks the website, Netlify is like, I'm not letting you do that. So my website is not going to go down because I did something stupid, which happens every now and then. It's just not going to update until I fix whatever went wrong. So yeah, that makes it really nice and easy. I just wanted to, again, like put this slide up here. So these slides, there's a link to these slides that I've gone through. There's a link to my blog post on Why You Should Blog, which is essentially that first 10 minutes of me talking. There's a post that I made back in 2017. So that was like, I guess 3 years ago now, on using Netlify specifically. I don't know if things have changed since then. It's probably still pretty accurate because I set my website up using Netlify back in 2017, apparently. So this is based on what I had to do in 2017, and it's very quick and very short. There's like literally a few steps. It's not super complicated. And then there's this Blogdown book that if you are using Blogdown is just the #1 resource. It's just really easy, really straightforward. Got a lot of information in there. And yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully it was useful. Feel free to ask any questions. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rebecca, for all these useful tips, and also for showing us how easy it is to actually build a blog from R, which is unbelievable easy.
Yeah.
So,
it's surprising. I literally typed 2 commands into R and I had a blog going. So it's pretty nice.
Yeah, it's incredibly easy, and I think I'm gonna try it. I mean, I'm definitely going to try it anytime soon.
yeah.
I'm so glad. Yeah.
So yeah, that was the idea, Simona. So this is a great.
Now start working.
I highly recommend having a blog. It's been really, really beneficial to me. So, you know, yeah, and feel free to like send me an email and just mention that you are on this meetup if you have any questions. I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have later on when you're trying this yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
So I have one more question.
Yeah.
Until maybe somebody else has questions, but I'm just curious. So Netlify, actually, it's like a server or something. So this is how it's working. So my experience for Blogdown was only with GitHub pages.
Yeah.
And I never understood why I should also add Netlify. So based on your experience, Netlify actually brings something more, meaning that it gives you your site, so it gives 100% time to have the blog.
Yeah.
Served.
Yeah. It's not necessarily that Netlify adds something on top of GitHub pages. So there's like a GitHub repository. To use GitHub pages to make a website from that, you usually have to like add things to another branch and then point things to that branch. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I often just ended up with issues with that extra layer of having another branch. The thing with Netlify is you don't need another branch. So you can use GitHub pages or Netlify. So Netlify is you just point it to the repository and it figures it out. Like it doesn't need a new branch. It doesn't need everything. You point it to the repository. You say the HTML stuff lives in the public folder and then it just works. And I never, once I started using Netlify, I never ran into issues with the hosting of the website. Whereas with GitHub pages, I had so many issues and I never quite understood what was going on.
Yeah. I mean, when I tried, I had a lot of issues indeed. And I created a dedicated folder, I remember, from which the site was read. Anyway, I made it, but it was a bit painful. I need to confess. But otherwise, the experience of creating a blog in R, it's just as you showed us.
Yeah,
easy.
Like everything. So Yihui wrote R Markdown, Knitter, Bookdown, Blogdown. Like he wrote all of these things. And it's just everything that he has made is just so easy to use. I'm writing my book in Bookdown, which is kind of related to Blogdown. It's a way of combining a bunch of R Markdown files into a book, which can be HTML or PDF or like through LaTeX or like, it's just amazing. Like I think one of the biggest parts of R is the community of people that are just building things for it, because the stuff they've built is amazing. R as a language itself is weird, but like the tidyverse and like R Markdown and all of that kind of stuff is what I think makes R really great.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I also like, as you said, the tidy models. I think it's a great thing now. And I've also read the page, the tidymodels.org.
Yeah.
I just started. It's not,
Yeah.
I thought it's quite resourceful, and it's
For sure. I think there's still some things that are a little bit inconsistent in it. Because it's new, like they're still working on it, but it like so far I've started using it, and it does make life so much easier because all of the different models I want to fit now have the same syntax. I don't have to change anything. Whereas like before it was like, oh, this one only accepts matrix formats. This one only accepts data frames. This one, the outcome has to be a factor. This one, like it was always really frustrating. So tidy models has kind of been really nice. I agree for for kind of solidifying that.
And it feels like it's more towards these new trends with deep learning and AI a bit, because it gives you easiness in creating machine learning stuff, and
Totally.
people likes to hear nice words. So I think it's also an opportunity for for the community. I mean, not.
I agree.
Because we were doing anyway great stuff in art. So. Yeah. Questions? Other questions from? No more questions. No. Do we have any other people who are going during summer to try Blogdown besides Simona? Maybe we can. Anna? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give it a try, definitely.
Awesome.
Good. That's nice. That's really nice. So I think it's quite good, Rebecca. We managed to convert two people we used to be 11, so I would say it's quite good.
I would say so too.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So for finishing the event, I was thinking just to split ourselves into breakout rooms in which we could casually discuss about R, and I would be really grateful if you could spend maximum 7 minutes on what you would like to discover in our next season, meaning starting September. So stay close. I will just split you in breakout rooms. I will close the YouTube live because we were live on YouTube. Thank you again, Rebecca. I will have to. So I will do it like.
I'm actually going to have to head out, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you a lot, and we'll come back to you with news on our bloggers from Bucharest.
Yeah, if you guys set up a website, please do send it to me. I'd love to see it.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rebecca.
All right. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Atunci o să schimbăm am rămas doar